Ever wonder how Amish families preserve an entire year's worth of food without a single kilowatt of electricity? For them, it's not a hobby, it's survival. Without refrigeration, storing the harvest means the difference between thriving through winter or going hungry. While we panic over power outages, Amish communities have perfected preservation techniques that have kept generations fed through harsh winters and economic downturns. Beneath the rolling farmland of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, Amish families have perfected a method of food storage that doesn't require electricity, but only nature's refrigerator. These underground chambers aren't just holes in the ground, they're ingenious storage systems that maintain steady temperatures year-round. Typically dug into hillsides or built partially underground, root cellars stay between 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit in winter and 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit in summer. The earth provides natural insulation, creating ideal conditions for keeping produce fresh months after harvest. Our family root cellar saved us thousands of dollars, explains an Amish farmer. We'd still be eating crisp apples and firm potatoes in April from the previous fall's harvest. The science behind these natural refrigerators is straightforward. Underground temperatures fluctuate much less than above ground. In winter, the Earth's warmth prevents freezing. In summer, its coolness prevents spoiling. Add proper ventilation to control humidity, and you've created perfect storage conditions. What makes root cellars remarkable is their versatility. Different areas maintain slightly different conditions, allowing for storage of various foods. Root vegetables like potatoes, carrots, and turnips occupy the main chamber, often stored in slightly damp sand or sawdust. These staples can last 4 to 6 months when properly stored. Apples and pears sit on slatted wooden shelves where air circulates freely, extending their freshness well into winter. Cabbage heads, hung upside down from the ceiling, can stay fresh until spring thaw. Onions and garlic prefer drier sections near ventilation shafts. Stored this way, they remain usable for up to 8 months, far longer than in modern kitchen pantries. Some Amish families even preserve eggs in water glass solution, keeping them fresh for months in cool cellar corners. Building an effective root cellar requires considerable knowledge. Walls of stone or brick provide structural support and thermal mass. Drainage is crucial. Many cellars feature gravel floors with channels to prevent flooding. Ventilation pipes at different heights create natural airflow that prevents mold while maintaining humidity. My first attempt at building a root cellar turned into a swimming hole, says an Amish craftsman. I learned that good drainage isn't optional. The economic benefit is substantial. A family with a well-stocked cellar can eat fresh, homegrown produce year-round without expensive grocery store purchases during winter. One Amish household estimated saving approximately $1,800 annually through cellar storage. For those without access to hillsides, adaptations exist. Some Amish communities in flatter regions build above-ground root cellars, essentially earth-bermed structures with thick walls and soil-covered roofs. Others convert old water cisterns or excavate spaces beneath existing outbuildings. The root cellar follows a seasonal rhythm. Late summer and fall bring a flurry of activity as families stock their underground pantries with garden harvests. Winter requires careful management, regular checks for sprouting potatoes or apples beginning to turn. By spring, the cellar gradually empties as preserved foods bridge the gap until fresh crops emerge. Perhaps most impressive is the sustainability. A well-designed cellar can maintain steady temperatures for generations with zero energy input. Many functioning Amish root cellars have operated continuously for over 150 years. Their stone walls as effective today as when first constructed. Our cellar was built during the Civil War, shares an Amish grandmother. It's kept food for 5 generations without a single repair. Try getting that kind of service from a modern refrigerator. The organization inside these underground chambers reveals generations of accumulated wisdom. Vegetables are never stored near fruits that release ethylene gas, like apples, which accelerates ripening. Root vegetables with tops removed last longer, while those same greens might be eaten immediately. Nothing goes to waste. Even vegetables beginning to soften find purpose in soups or stews. Root cellars represent more than just practical food storage. They embody a deeper wisdom passed through generations. These underground sanctuaries connect families to the natural rhythms of the earth, teaching patience and foresight in a way no modern convenience can replicate. As we explore the Amish approach to preservation, We discover not just techniques, but a philosophy that transforms necessity into an art form, creating a relationship with food that modern society has largely forgotten. Summer in Amish country brings a symphony of sounds that modern kitchens rarely hear. The ping of sealed jars cooling, the bubbling of water baths, and the rhythmic chopping of vegetables destined for preservation. Canning season transforms kitchens into production centers where families work together to capture summer's abundance in glass jars. The numbers are staggering. A typical Amish household might process over 500 jars annually, with some larger families exceeding 1,200 jars in a single summer. When you consider that each jar represents a future meal secured without refrigeration, the magnitude of this undertaking becomes clear. We start planning canning season in January, explains an Amish mother. By February, we're ordering lids and checking our jar inventory. Come July, every flat surface in the kitchen belongs to canning. The process remains remarkably similar to methods used by our great-grandmothers. Clean glass jars are filled with prepared food, sealed with two-piece lids, and processed in boiling water or pressure canners. Heat kills spoilage organisms while creating a vacuum seal that prevents contamination. Unlike modern consumers who might can a few specialty jams as a hobby, Amish families preserve nearly everything: green beans, corn, tomatoes, applesauce, peaches, cherries, beef, chicken, venison, soup, and even butter. Nothing goes to waste. The organization resembles a small factory during peak season. Children snap beans or hull peas at the kitchen table. Teenagers wash jars and manage water baths. Parents oversee the operation, ensuring proper processing times and checking seals. Safety protocols aren't taken lightly. While botulism is rare, fewer than 20 foodborne cases annually in the United States, Amish canners follow strict guidelines passed down through generations and reinforced by county extension offices. The pressure canner, a heavy aluminum pot with a locking lid and pressure gauge, plays a crucial role in safely preserving low-acid foods like vegetables and meats. Reaching 240 degrees Fahrenheit under pressure, these canners eliminate botulism spores that survive in boiling water. When I married, my mother gave me her recipe box and a pressure canner, shares an Amish homemaker. She said one would feed my family and the other would keep them from getting sick. The only product we'll ever promote on our channel is a book by Claude Davis, a veteran prepper, about 126 superfoods and preservation methods from crisis times like the Great Depression and wartime that are impossible to find elsewhere. We decided to promote his book because we are the last generation able to share these techniques and superfoods to our children or grandchildren. It would be a shame to see this information about highly nutritious foods and preservation methods to survive crises disappear. You can also find a book about herbal remedies from Nicole Apelian on their store. If you're watching this on TV, you can look up our channel, Frugal Solutions, on your phone or tablet and find the books by clicking the link in our channel description or any other video description. Canning supplies dominate Amish pantry storage. Families maintain hundreds of reusable jars, rotating them through seasons for decades. Replacement lids, the only single-use component, are purchased in bulk, often by the gross. A thrifty family might spend just pennies per jar on new lids each season. The economic benefit is considerable. Home canned produce saves approximately 50% compared to store-bought equivalents. For large Amish families preserving hundreds of jars, this translates to thousands of dollars annually. Beyond economics, canning creates food security independent of modern supply chains. When winter storms block roads or economic downturns affect cash flow, Amish families simply head to their pantry shelves. Many households maintain a 1 to 2 year supply of essentials. The social aspect shouldn't be overlooked. Canning brings families together in cooperative labor. Multiple generations work side by side, sharing stories and passing down techniques that don't appear in written recipes. Children learn measuring, timing, food safety, and the satisfaction of creating winter security through summer work. Occasionally, the process leads to memorable mishaps. An Amish woman recounts her first attempt at canning peaches. "I forgot to put the rack in the bottom of the water bath. Those jars exploded when they touched the direct heat. I was finding peach pieces in ceiling corners for months." While home canning declined sharply in mainstream America after World War II, Recent years have seen renewed interest. However, what trendy homesteaders discover as new skills represent uninterrupted tradition in Amish communities, where the practice never disappeared. Beyond water bath canning, Amish families employ other preservation methods that require different approaches and skills. Each technique serves a specific purpose in their comprehensive food storage system, ensuring nothing goes to waste and every season's bounty contributes to year-round sustenance. These preservation methods represent more than practical techniques. They embody an inheritance of wisdom passed through generations. While modern society embraces convenience, these timeless practices silently demonstrate how self-sufficiency, community cooperation, and resourcefulness create true security that no technology can replicate, connecting those who practice them to both ancestors and descendants through shared knowledge. Behind Amish farmhouses stand small wooden structures where smoke curls through the air each autumn. These smokehouses preserve meat through methods predating refrigeration by thousands of years. The Amish didn't invent meat preservation, but they've maintained these ancient techniques while the rest of society embraced modern refrigeration. Their methods connect directly to practices used by Native Americans, Vikings, and medieval Europeans, all who faced the same challenge of keeping meat edible without ice. Each wood creates its own flavor signature, explains an Amish elder. Hickory gives a bold taste, applewood adds sweetness, and cherry creates a delicate smoke profile. Two distinct approaches dominate Amish meat preservation: smoking and drying. Smoking primarily enhances flavor while providing some preservation benefits through compounds that inhibit bacterial growth. Drying dehydration removes moisture, creating an environment where bacteria simply can't multiply. The science proves elegantly simple. Bacteria need water to grow. By removing moisture or creating hostile conditions, meat stops spoiling. Properly dried beef jerky contains just 10 to 15% moisture, down from raw meat's 75%. This dramatic reduction prevents harmful bacteria from thriving. Amish smokehouses range from elaborate brick structures to simple wooden sheds. Most feature metal hanging rods and separate fireboxes connected by flues to control smoke flow. Temperatures rarely exceed 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The goal isn't cooking, but gradually drying while infusing smoke compounds. Traditional butchering begins once cool weather arrives in November or December. This natural refrigeration provides a safe window for initial processing before preservation begins, a perfect example of working with seasonal temperatures rather than against them. For beginners, bacon offers an accessible introduction to smoking. Pork belly cures in salt, sugar, and spices for about a week, then smokes for 12 to 24 hours. The result bears little resemblance to commercial versions. Amish bacon, thicker cut and deeply flavored, continues developing complexity for months when stored properly. Sausage making transforms less desirable cuts into treasured foods. Fresh ground pork mixed with family secret spice blends fills cleaned intestinal casings. These links smoke slowly until perfectly preserved. Each Amish settlement boasts regional variations, some featuring apple cider, others incorporating unique spice combinations. Beef jerky represents perhaps the most travel-worthy preserved meat. Thin sliced lean beef soaks briefly in a salt cure, then dries completely, traditionally in sun and wind. Though modern Amish methods often use low-temperature smokehouse settings, the resulting product stays edible for months without refrigeration. "We made jerky for my nephew's hiking trip," shares an Amish uncle. 6 months later, he still had some left. Tough as shoe leather, but perfectly safe to eat. The community aspect remains central to meat preservation. Butchering days bring multiple families together in efficient work groups. Men handle initial butchering. Women oversee sausage making and packaging. This cooperation transforms whole animals into preserved products within remarkably short time frames. Not all preservation requires smoke. Some communities specialize in air-dried beef, thin-sliced top round cured briefly, then hung in well-ventilated locations for several weeks. The resulting product delivers intense beef flavor concentrated through moisture removal rather than smoke infusion. Modern food safety experts sometimes question traditional preservation, but the Amish track record speaks volumes. Foodborne illness remains rare in communities practicing these techniques because practitioners understand critical safety factors: proper salt concentrations, reliable smoking temperatures, appropriate drying times, and careful storage. My grandfather claimed he could taste whether meat was smoked during a full or new moon, laughs an Amish farmer. Grandmother just rolled her eyes and said it actually depended on whether he remembered to watch the fire properly. Despite smoking and drying's effectiveness, these methods significantly transform meat's flavor profile. When preservation needs call for maintaining more natural flavors, Amish communities turn toward another ancient technique, one that seems counterintuitive because it deliberately cultivates microorganisms instead of eliminating them. The controlled spoilage of fermentation creates entirely new foods with months-long shelf life. That smell means it's working. An Amish grandmother laughs as her granddaughter wrinkles her nose at the bubbling crock of sauerkraut. Good bacteria are having a party in there. Fermentation stands as perhaps the most counterintuitive food preservation method in the Amish toolkit. While other techniques fight microorganisms, fermentation actively recruits them as allies. The right bacteria transform cabbage into sauerkraut, cucumbers into pickles, and milk into yogurt, simultaneously preserving food and creating entirely new flavors. The magic happens through lactic acid fermentation. Beneficial bacteria convert sugars into lactic acid, creating an environment too acidic for harmful organisms to survive. This natural process has preserved food safely for thousands of years across virtually every human culture. Cabbage becomes sauerkraut through remarkably simple means. Shredded cabbage mixed with salt, about 3 tablespoons per 5 pounds, releases liquid through osmosis. Submerged in this self-created brine and kept oxygen-free, beneficial bacteria thrive while harmful organisms cannot. Within 3 weeks, crisp cabbage transforms into tangy sauerkraut that keeps for months, even years, without refrigeration. Amish kitchens commonly feature large ceramic crocks dedicated to fermentation projects. These vessels, often passed down through generations, develop ideal bacterial communities over decades of use. A well-seasoned crock becomes a prized heirloom, credited with producing superior ferments compared to newer containers. Our pickle crock has 1923 scratched inside the lid, shares an Amish woman. My husband's great-grandfather made his first batch then. 4 generations later, we're still using it every summer. The pickles just keep getting better. The nutritional benefits prove impressive. During fermentation, bacteria pre-digest complex compounds, making nutrients more bioavailable. Vitamin C content actually increases. 1 cup of sauerkraut contains nearly 35 milligrams of vitamin C, more than the cabbage it came from. Traditional ferments also deliver probiotics that modern science increasingly recognizes as crucial for digestive health. My doctor told me to eat more sauerkraut for my digestion, chuckles an Amish elder. I've been eating it daily for 80 years. Maybe I should start charging him for medical advice instead. Beyond sauerkraut, Amish communities ferment an impressive variety of foods. Cucumber pickles fermented with dill, garlic, and grape leaves, which help maintain crispness, remain a summer staple. Beet kvass, a tangy, earthy drink made from fermented beets, serves as both beverage and health tonic. Sourdough bread starters pass through families for generations, each developing unique flavor profiles. Some communities make fermented corn relish using a similar process to sauerkraut, but with fresh sweet corn kernels as the base. Others produce fermented green tomato pickles from end-of-season unripe tomatoes that would otherwise go to waste. The timing of fermentation projects follows harvest rhythms. Late summer brings cucumber fermentation. Fall cabbage becomes winter sauerkraut. Milk ferments year-round in communities with dairy cows. This seasonal approach ensures preservation work spreads evenly throughout the year. Temperature control presents the primary challenge. Fermentation proceeds too slowly in cold conditions, but too quickly in excessive heat. The ideal temperature range falls between 65 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit for most vegetable ferments. Amish homes without electricity maintain these conditions through clever placement. Crocks rest in cool basements during summer and near wood stoves during winter. Success requires patience and careful observation. Unlike canning's precise timing, fermentation follows visual and aromatic cues. Bubbling indicates active fermentation. Sour smells suggest proper acidification. White surface yeast requires removal but doesn't necessarily ruin the batch. This intuitive approach connects practitioners directly to their food in ways modern preservation methods don't allow. You develop a relationship with your ferments, explains an Amish woman. They're alive, after all. Some batches get extra tangy, others stay mild. Each develops its own personality. The preservation power of fermentation is remarkable. Properly maintained sauerkraut stays edible for 12 to 18 months without refrigeration. The high acid environment, pH typically below 4.0, prevents spoilage and foodborne illness. For communities without electricity, this long-term stability proves invaluable. Many Amish families maintain continuous fermentation cycles. As one crock empties, another begins, ensuring year-round access to probiotic-rich foods. This continuous process builds fermentation expertise that modern weekend hobbyists rarely develop. While fermentation excels at preserving vegetables and dairy, other foods require different approaches, particularly those high in fat content that might turn rancid over time. For these situations, Amish preservers turn to one of humanity's oldest preservation methods. Walk into any Amish pantry during winter, and you'll likely spot hams hanging from ceiling hooks. These aren't just any hams, they're time capsules of flavor, preserved through one of humanity's oldest food preservation methods: salt curing. Salt preservation predates written history. Ancient Egyptians used salt to preserve fish from the Nile. Roman legions received part of their wages in salt, the origin of our word salary. Medieval Europeans preserved entire winters' worth of meat through salting. The Amish continue this tradition today, maintaining techniques largely unchanged for centuries. How does a simple mineral preserve meat for months or even years? The science is surprisingly straightforward. Salt creates an environment too hostile for bacteria to survive through two mechanisms: osmotic pressure and dehydration. When salt touches meat, it draws moisture out while simultaneously penetrating the tissue. Bacteria need water to multiply. Without it, they simply can't grow. My grandfather's rule was 1 pound of salt for every 10 pounds of meat, shares an Amish butcher. He'd say, be generous with the salt or be friends with the undertaker. A bit dramatic, but food safety wasn't something to joke about before refrigeration. The typical Amish salt curing process begins with fresh meat, usually pork or beef. A mixture of salt and other preservatives, often sugar, sodium nitrate, and spices, gets rubbed thoroughly into the meat. After the initial coating, the meat rests in a cool location while the salt begins its work. Every few days, any liquid that accumulates gets drained away, and more cure mixture may be applied. Country ham undergoes a particularly intensive curing process. After initial salting, these hams cure for 40 to 60 days. They're then rinsed, hung to dry for several weeks, and sometimes smoked. The final aging stage can last anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. During this long process, the ham develops increasingly complex flavors through enzyme activity, similar to how aged cheese develops character over time. The preservative power of salt curing is remarkable. A properly cured country ham can remain shelf-stable for years without refrigeration. Civil War soldiers carried salt-cured meat on long campaigns. Sailors took salt pork on voyages lasting months. Before modern refrigeration, salt-cured meats provided crucial protein through winter months when fresh meat wasn't available. We found a ham in my great-aunt's attic that was at least 15 years old, recounts an Amish elder. Nobody wanted to eat it, but we were curious. After soaking it to remove some salt, we fried a small piece. Tasted just fine. A bit stronger than usual, but perfectly safe, though I don't recommend waiting quite that long. The salt-cured products most commonly prepared in Amish communities include country ham, salt-cured, aged ham that develops intense flavor over months or years, salt pork, fatty pork belly, or side meat preserved with heavy salting corned beef, beef brisket cured with salt and spices, bacon, pork belly cured with salt, sugar, and often nitrates before smoking. Modern curing methods often incorporate refrigeration, but traditional Amish approaches rely on seasonal temperatures. Butchering and initial curing happen during cold months, November through February, when natural temperatures provide refrigeration. By the time warmer weather arrives, the curing process has progressed enough that higher temperatures won't cause spoilage. Salt-cured meats require special preparation before eating. Their extremely high salt content necessitates soaking or parboiling to make them palatable. Country ham slices might soak overnight before cooking, while salt pork often requires parboiling and rinsing before being added to beans or greens. "My first attempt cooking salt pork was a disaster," laughs an Amish woman. "I didn't soak it first. We all took one bite and ran for water. My husband said he wasn't sure if he was eating dinner or becoming dinner himself through all that salt." While smoke preservation focuses on flavor and fermentation harnesses bacteria, salt curing excels at long-term stability. However, all these methods work primarily with animal proteins or vegetable crops. For the backbone of traditional diets, the staple grains that provide daily calories, Amish families need different preservation approaches altogether, methods that can safely store wheat, corn, and oats for years without spoilage. 50-pound sacks of wheat line the walls of an Amish granary, stacked neatly on wooden pallets that keep them off the concrete floor. These aren't just ingredients for next month's bread. They're insurance against hunger for the next decade. Grain storage represents the longest-term food preservation in the Amish arsenal. While vegetables might keep for months and cured meats for a year or two, properly stored grains remain viable for 10-plus years. This extended timeline creates true food security, allowing families to weather poor harvests or economic downturns without missing meals. "Wheat berries from our 2012 harvest still bake perfectly good bread," remarks an Amish farmer. "The secret isn't complicated. Keep it dry, keep it cool, keep pests out. People have been doing this since biblical times." Indeed, archaeological evidence confirms humans have successfully stored grains for thousands of years. Egyptian grain silos from 1000 BCE used many of the same principles Amish families employ today. The fundamentals haven't changed because they work: moisture control, temperature management, and pest prevention. Moisture represents the primary enemy of stored grains. Wheat, oats, corn, and other cereal grains must be thoroughly dried before storage, typically to 12% moisture content or less. At higher moisture levels, mold growth becomes inevitable. Many Amish families use traditional methods to test dryness, biting kernels to check for crispness or listening for the distinctive snap that indicates properly dried grain. "My grandfather used to say if you can dent a kernel with your thumbnail, it's still too wet for storage," shares an Amish miller. Simple test, but it works. Temperature control follows close behind moisture as a preservation priority. Heat accelerates spoilage while encouraging insect activity. Ideal storage temperatures hover between 40 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit, naturally achievable in basement areas or north-facing storage rooms. Some communities maintain separate granaries built partially underground to maintain these ideal conditions year-round. Pest management presents perhaps the most challenging aspect of long-term grain storage. Weevils, moths, and rodents all view grain stockpiles as all-you-can-eat buffets. The Amish approach combines preventive measures with periodic inspections. Bay leaves scattered among grain sacks naturally repel many insects. Diatomaceous earth, fossilized algae powder, kills insects through microscopic abrasion. Cedar blocks deter rodents through their natural oils. Strategic placement of barn cats provides living pest control. "We had a mouse problem in our grain room years back," chuckles an Amish grandfather. "Brought in this scrawny barn cat. Looked half-starved himself. 2 weeks later, no more mice, and the cat looked like he'd swallowed a baseball. Best employee I ever hired, and all I paid him was milk and occasional table scraps." Bulk storage methods vary by grain type and community. Many families store wheat and oats in heavy cotton or burlap sacks, allowing some air circulation while keeping contents contained. Corn might remain on the cob in slatted cribs, drying further during storage. Some households use food-grade plastic buckets with gamma seal lids for maximum protection against humidity and pests. The economics of grain storage prove compelling. A typical Amish family might store 300 to 500 pounds of wheat annually, enough for a year's worth of bread with extra serving as long-term security. At today's wheat prices, $8 to $10 per bushel, this represents $250 to $400 in food value secured against inflation and supply disruptions. Strategic rotation prevents waste. The oldest grain gets used first, while newer harvests go into storage. This first-in, first-out system ensures nothing spoils while maintaining emergency reserves. Many families mark storage containers with harvest dates to maintain proper rotation. Processing occurs gradually throughout the year. Stored wheat berries get ground into flour shortly before baking to maximize nutrition and flavor. Oats might be rolled weekly for breakfast porridge. Corn requires more processing, grinding for cornmeal or nixtamalization, soaking in lime water, for hominy and tortillas. Store-bought flour can't compare to freshly ground, insists an Amish baker. The oils in the wheat germ haven't oxidized yet. Makes bread with actual flavor instead of that cardboard taste from grocery store flour. While modern preppers discover grain storage through YouTube videos and survival blogs, Amish families inherit these practices through generations of lived experience. The knowledge passing between generations doesn't just preserve food, it preserves culture and self-sufficiency. Beyond the practical aspects of grain storage lies a philosophical approach to food security that views seasonal bounty as preparation for future needs. This perspective reveals itself in the community's entire approach to the natural cycles of agriculture, a rhythm that has sustained them for generations. January's kitchen calendar in an Amish home doesn't just mark days, it orchestrates a year-long choreography of food preservation that begins long before the first seed touches soil. The preservation cycle starts in late winter with planning. February finds families at kitchen tables, seed catalogs open, calculating exactly how many tomato plants they'll need for a year's worth of sauce, how many cucumber hills for pickles, how many cabbage plants for sauerkraut. This isn't casual gardening, it's mathematical food security. We plant 60 tomato plants for our family of 8, explains an Amish mother. That gives us around 900 pounds of tomatoes, which becomes 200 quarts of sauce, 50 quarts of salsa, and 40 quarts of juice. By February, we're usually down to our last 30 jars, so we know exactly what we need. Spring brings the first preservation activities as winter stores dwindle. March and April see families foraging wild greens, dandelions, ramps, nettles that provide fresh nutrition after months of preserved foods. These greens get dried or made into pestos preserved under oil. Root cellars get cleaned and repaired during this relative downtime, preparing for fall's bounty. Spring cleaning isn't just for houses, laughs an Amish farmer. The root cellar needs attention too, unless you want your potatoes flavored with whatever spilled last November. Early summer launches the serious preservation season. June strawberries become the first canning projects, jams and preserves that will brighten winter breakfasts. By July, the work intensifies dramatically as multiple crops mature simultaneously. This period, nicknamed sweating season in some communities, represents the year's most demanding preservation push. The statistics during peak season prove staggering. A single industrious family might process 300 plus quarts of vegetables and fruits in July alone, 75 to 100 pounds of green beans in a week, 40 to 50 quarts of applesauce daily during the September apple harvest, and 1,200 plus total jars preserved between June and October. August brings a brief lull before fall's final harvest rush. This window provides opportunity to check earlier preservation work, testing random jar seals, examining ferments, rotating root cellar contents. September and October deliver the final preservation projects: winter squash, curing, apple processing, and late-season vegetables. By late October, my hands have processed so much food they practically move on their own, jokes an Amish grandmother. I dreamed I was canning in my sleep last year. My husband said I was reaching for jar lids on my nightstand. November transitions to butchering season as colder temperatures provide natural refrigeration for meat processing. Families often work cooperatively, helping each other preserve pork, beef, and chicken through smoking, curing, and canning methods. The timing is strategic, cool enough for safe meat handling, but not so cold that outdoor work becomes uncomfortable. Winter represents the eating season, months when preservation work largely pauses while families enjoy the previous year's efforts. December through February, meals showcase root cellar vegetables, home-canned fruits, preserved meats, and fermented foods. This season also brings communal enjoyment of preservation's benefits through shared meals and gift exchanges of specialty preserved items. The yearly rhythm isn't just practical, it's deeply connected to cultural and religious values. The Amish view of stewardship means responsibly managing seasonal abundance to prevent waste. Preservation represents good stewardship of God's provision, ensuring nothing goes to waste while creating security for leaner times. Weather variations require flexibility within this calendar. Early frosts might accelerate fall preservation plans. Drought years mean prioritizing limited harvests for the most essential preserved foods. Bumper crops require additional preservation efforts, sometimes leading to community work events where multiple families process excess together. Mother Nature doesn't check our schedules, observes an Amish elder. Some years the tomatoes and peaches ripen simultaneously, and we just have to work longer days. Other years there's perfect spacing between crops. You learn to dance with the seasons rather than expecting them to follow your rhythm. This seasonal approach to food allows Amish communities to maintain remarkable self-sufficiency while utilizing minimal outside resources. However, even with perfect preservation timing, some foods remain challenging to store long-term without modern refrigeration. For these items, Amish families turn to creative alternatives that showcase their ingenuity and deep understanding of natural processes. The small stone building sits partially submerged in a hillside, cool water from an underground spring bubbling through a shallow trough inside. Welcome to the Springhouse, one of several ingenious cold storage solutions that keep Amish foods fresh without electricity. Before electric refrigerators became household standards, people managed to keep butter from melting, milk from souring, and eggs from spoiling through clever use of naturally cool spaces. Amish communities have maintained these techniques while the rest of us forgot them. Springhouses represent perhaps the most elegant natural refrigeration system. These small structures built over natural springs maintain temperatures between 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, perfect for dairy products, fresh eggs, and vegetables needing short-term cooling. The flowing water creates gentle, evaporative cooling while preventing freezing in winter. My great-grandfather built our springhouse in 1892, shares an Amish dairy farmer. It works exactly as it did 130 years ago. The milk stays cold, the butter stays firm, and our electric bill stays zero. Water-based cooling systems extend beyond springhouses. Some families without access to natural springs create stream coolers, partially submerged containers anchored in flowing creeks. These waterproof boxes with ventilated lids keep food items 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit cooler than ambient air temperatures. Milk cans might spend the night cooling in these stream baths, gradually lowering to safe storage temperatures. The physics behind these methods is straightforward. Water conducts heat away from containers much more efficiently than air, while flowing water constantly removes the transferred heat. Additionally, water temperatures fluctuate more slowly than air temperatures, providing stability through day-night cycles. Winter brings additional cold storage opportunities through ice harvesting. When ponds and lakes freeze solid in January and February, teams of workers cut blocks weighing 50 to 100 pounds each. These blocks get packed in insulated ice houses, typically underground or earth-bermed structures filled with sawdust or straw for insulation. The record for ice preservation in our community was set by my uncle, boasts an Amish teenager. He had ice blocks lasting until September from January cutting. Of course, they were more like ice cubes by then, but still cold enough to chill lemonade. A properly constructed ice house can maintain freezing temperatures well into summer. The massive thermal mass of densely packed ice melts exceedingly slowly when properly insulated. Some communities maintain communal ice houses where multiple families store perishables during summer months. Cold cellars provide another temperature-controlled environment. Unlike root cellars focused on maintaining cool but not cold conditions, cold cellars aim for temperatures just above freezing. These structures, typically built into north-facing hillsides, feature heavily insulated doors, minimal ventilation, and sometimes cold sinks, floor depressions that trap cold air. Timing and strategy play crucial roles in natural refrigeration. Morning milk gets processed immediately or cooled quickly in springhouses. Butter churning happens during the coolest parts of the day. Egg gathering occurs frequently to minimize exposure to warm temperatures. The economics of natural refrigeration prove compelling. A well-constructed springhouse costs perhaps $1,500 to $2,000 in materials, but operates essentially maintenance-free for decades. Compare this to electric refrigerators costing $800 to $1,200, lasting 10 to 15 years, and consuming approximately $100 in electricity annually. Natural cooling methods have limitations, however. They can't achieve freezing temperatures during summer, restricting long-term storage of highly perishable items. This constraint shapes Amish cooking patterns. Fresh meat gets consumed quickly after butchering, while preservation methods like smoking and curing handle longer-term storage needs. I tried retrieving butter from our springhouse during a summer thunderstorm, recalls an Amish grandmother. Slipped on the wet stones and fell right in. My husband said I looked like a drowned cat, but at least the butter stayed dry. I held it overhead the whole time. Priorities, you know? These natural refrigeration methods keep perishables fresh for days or weeks, bridging the gap between immediate use and long-term preservation. But for truly long-lasting preservation of certain fruits, Amish families employ another approach entirely. A sweet solution that transforms summer's bounty into treats that can be enjoyed throughout the coldest months. Steam rises from copper kettles as ruby-red strawberry jam bubbles on an Amish kitchen stove. The intense aroma fills the room, sweet, tangy, and undeniably mouth-watering. Sugar preservation transforms summer's fleeting bounty into winter treasures through a process that dates back centuries. Sugar preserves food through a surprisingly simple mechanism: osmotic pressure. When high concentrations of sugar surround bacteria or mold cells, water gets pulled out of these microorganisms through osmosis. Without sufficient internal water, bacteria simply can't multiply. It's dehydration at the microscopic level. Death by sweetness. My grandmother made strawberry jam so sweet it would make your teeth hurt, recalls an Amish woman while stirring her own less sweet version. But those jars never spoiled, even when stored in the pantry for years. She knew exactly how much sugar created preservation magic. The science confirms grandmother's wisdom. Foods preserved with at least 65% sugar content remain shelf-stable without refrigeration. This sugar concentration creates an environment where spoilage organisms simply cannot function. Traditional jam making demonstrates sugar preservation at its most basic. Equal weights of fruit and sugar cooked together until reaching the perfect set point, typically 220 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level, where pectin activation and water evaporation create that perfect jammy consistency. The resulting preserve contains approximately 67% sugar, making it naturally shelf-stable for 12 to 18 months. We have neighborhood competitions for the best blackberry jam, confides an Amish homemaker. Last year's winner had perfect consistency. Not too firm, not too runny. The secret? She picked berries during the full moon. Does that affect jam? Probably not, but nobody's brave enough to argue with her blue ribbons. Beyond basic jams, Amish sugar preservation encompasses remarkable variety. Fruit butters cook fruit pulp with sugar for hours until thick and spreadable. Apple butter, a particular favorite, gets enhanced with cinnamon and cloves before canning. Conserves combine multiple fruits with sugar, often including nuts and raisins. These complex preserves frequently appear at community gatherings and weddings. Jellies strain fruit juice before adding sugar and pectin, creating transparent spreads perfect for delicate applications. Fruit syrups preserve berry juices with sugar for winter pancake toppings and dessert sauces. Honey preservation presents another sweet option. With antibacterial properties and approximately 80% sugar content, honey naturally preserves fruits for extended periods. Some Amish families maintain beehives specifically for preservation purposes, harvesting 30 to 60 pounds of honey annually per hive. Our family's oldest preserve dates back to 1979, boasts an Amish grandfather. A jar of raspberry jam made by my mother still sits on our pantry shelf, perfectly sealed and completely edible after 43 years. We keep it as a family trophy, though nobody's actually brave enough to taste it. Fruit leather represents sugar preservation in concentrated form. Fruit purees mixed with minimal sugar dry on special racks or parchment sheets until pliable but moisture-free. The resulting leather keeps for 6 to 12 months at room temperature, providing portable nutrition and sweet treats. Amish children think city kids calling those packaged fruit snacks fruit leather is hilarious, shares a community member. Our fruit leather actually looks like leather, not those brightly colored squares from the grocery store. Candied fruits demonstrate sugar's remarkable preservative power. Fruit pieces soak in increasingly concentrated sugar syrup over several days, gradually replacing internal moisture with sugar. The finished products, candied orange peels, crystallized ginger, or sugared cherries, remain shelf-stable for years while retaining vibrant flavors. The economics of sugar preservation make perfect sense for large families. A typical Amish household might process 200 plus pounds of fruit into preserves annually. At current retail prices, equivalent store-bought preserves would cost $800 to $1,200, while homemade versions require perhaps $150 in sugar and pectin plus family labor. Modern nutritional concerns about sugar consumption have modified some traditional recipes. Many families now make low-sugar versions for immediate consumption while maintaining high-sugar traditional preserves for long-term storage. This dual approach balances health considerations with practical preservation needs. Sweet preservation extends present abundance into future security, but eventually, even the most carefully preserved foods get consumed. True sustainability requires thinking beyond a single season's harvest to ensure future abundance. This perspective leads Amish families to the final practice that completes their preservation cycle, one that guarantees their self-sufficiency for generations to come. Paper envelopes fill a wooden box in an Amish kitchen drawer. Each carefully labeled package contains seeds, living time capsules connecting past harvests to future gardens. Seed saving completes the preservation cycle, transforming today's vegetables into tomorrow's food security. The mathematics of seed saving reveal its extraordinary efficiency. A single tomato plant can produce 20 to 80 fruits, each containing 150 to 300 seeds. That's potentially 24,000 seeds from one plant, enough to grow thousands of future meals from a plant that cost nothing after the first year. My father called seeds interest on the garden bank account, recalls an Amish farmer. Plant 1 bean, harvest 60. Keep 10 for planting next year, and you've earned 1,000% interest. Try getting that rate from your savings account. Unlike most modern gardeners who purchase new seeds annually, Amish families maintain seed lineages stretching back generations. These carefully selected varieties have adapted to local growing conditions, disease pressures, and family preferences through decades of intentional saving. The process follows simple but precise steps. Plants selected for seed saving must show desirable characteristics: productivity, disease resistance, flavor, and storage quality. Many get tagged while still growing, marking them for seed collection rather than immediate consumption. Each plant type requires specific handling. Tomato seeds ferment in their own juice for 2 to 3 days, removing germination-inhibiting compounds before washing and drying. Bean and pea pods dry completely on the plant before harvesting and threshing. Squash seeds get scooped out, washed, and thoroughly dried on screens. Lettuce flower stalks dry until seeds easily shake free into collection bags. Proper drying proves crucial for long-term viability. Most seeds require reduction to 8% moisture content or less, achieved through 1 to 2 weeks of air drying in well-ventilated locations. Insufficient drying leads to premature germination or fungal damage during storage. I once stored cucumber seeds that weren't quite dry, admits an Amish gardener. Opened the envelope the following spring to find what looked like tiny green worms. The seeds had started sprouting inside the packet. My wife still hasn't let me forget my envelope garden. The community aspect of seed saving strengthens food security. Annual seed swaps bring families together to trade varieties, ensuring genetic diversity while maintaining regional adaptations. These exchanges often include story sharing about particularly successful varieties or growing techniques. Some Amish communities maintain formal seed libraries, community-held collections ensuring variety preservation even if individual families experience crop failures. These libraries typically store each variety in multiple locations, preventing catastrophic loss from fire or other localized disasters. The age of preserved seeds can prove astonishing. While commercial seeds often lose viability after 2 to 3 years, properly stored heirloom seeds remain viable much longer. Tomato and pepper seeds regularly germinate after 7 to 10 years of storage. Some bean varieties remain viable for 20 plus years. The Fisher bean story is famous in our community, shares an Amish elder. During a difficult economic period in the 1920s, a family had to eat their entire bean harvest, saving just 7 beans for planting. From those 7 beans, they eventually restored their crop. We still grow that variety today, 200 years after it first came to our community with early settlers. Modern challenges have intensified seed-saving importance. Corporate consolidation has reduced commercial seed variety availability by an estimated 93% since 1903. Many heritage varieties now exist only in seed-saving networks like those maintained by Amish communities. The knowledge transfer surrounding seed saving proves as valuable as the seeds themselves. Children learn which plants cross-pollinate, requiring isolation, versus self-pollinate, which grow true from saved seed. They understand timing, when seeds reach maturity before harvesting. They recognize quality, selecting seeds from the healthiest, most productive plants. Seed packets get labeled meticulously with variety name, harvest year, special characteristics, and growing notes. These written records supplement oral traditions, ensuring accumulated wisdom transfers accurately between generations. Our most valuable inheritance wasn't money, reflects an Amish farmer. It was the seeds my grandparents brought when they moved here in 1956. Those seeds connected us to our ancestral land and provided food security through difficult years when commercial seeds might have been unaffordable. The ultimate preservation isn't keeping food as long as possible. It's maintaining the ability to grow food indefinitely. Through careful seed saving, Amish communities achieve true self-sufficiency, the capacity to produce not just this year's meals, but the foundation for all future harvests. From root cellars to seed saving, Amish food preservation methods create a sustainable cycle connecting past, present, and future harvests. These time-tested techniques not only provide food security without modern technology, but preserve cultural wisdom that sustains communities through changing seasons and generations.